First of all, Bitcoin is not crashing, as you hear in the media. The only thing that's crashing is the fiat Ponzi scheme.
He says, what I would tell any entrepreneur that thinks they're going to disrupt, you have to be 20 times better, at least.
John, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. I'll give you a few seconds to introduce yourself. John from CoinBeast.
We started CoinBeast 2 years ago. We're a Bitcoin education platform. So we really help people that are coming into the space, help them navigate a bit, and really develop their understanding for Bitcoin. We create a lot of free educational content like blogs, reviews. Now our big project is really to make CoinBeast more international. So now we're exploring different partnerships with groups from outside of North America and try to create more international content around Bitcoin, especially in countries where Bitcoin is a necessity and not just some speculative investments.
I like that. So this is your full-time job. You're co-founder of CoinBeast, and this is what you do?
Yeah, I mean, this takes up a lot of my time. I mean, my background is education, so I'm also a teacher.
Okay.
So that's kind of where the idea of CoinBeast started. Was it kind of merged like two of my obviously my passion with education and Bitcoin. It was it was a great idea, and so that's how it started. But I mean, my background is education.
That's so cool. So first of all, I love the Bitcoin space, the narrative. I have so much to talk about, especially with what's happening now. We're recording here. It's July 6th of 2022. So we got set back in terms of price a couple of years, but apparently one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. So
that's right.
The price denominated in USD doesn't matter. I had this thing. Sorry, it was a little awkward. I just wanted to show you. I saw on CoinBeast you guys have some merch. But I had bought this from a site I think called the 21 Hodl or something like that. So it's a steel sheet with the Bitcoin white paper printed on it.
Amazing.
Let me just give you my background quick. I jumped into Bitcoin in October 2020. So I think my first purchase price was in the 11K US.
Right.
So that was fun. Watched it go up, listened to the DCA stories. The narrative that I bought into was beautiful. Like, I was a full-time Bitcoiner, and I would talk about Bitcoin all the time. I loved it, and I didn't really care for the other cryptos, right?
The shitcoins.
Yeah, exactly. I spoke to another guy, actually. It's on my YouTube channel. He works for an exchange, but he helps people buy Bitcoin.
Yeah. And
I said, are you a Bitcoin maximalist? And he goes, I like to call myself a shitcoin minimalist.
Okay, that's good.
So what I'm getting at is, so I bought into the narrative 100%, especially there's so many cool people in the space. I love the story to death, and I still love it to death. And I have to admit that I'm disappointed with what happened with the price. And now I sort of blame it on bad actors and greed. Right. And the story of Bitcoin, the limited amount, and it's superior to any type of government money because we're not getting indebted. But these people, these bad actors that got in it, by the time I tweeted out recently, I said, man, my cue to get out or raise the flag was when like Kevin O'Leary started joining, So I just feel that's my story now in my head, that like these bad actors sort of ruined it for the rest of us. But I don't think Bitcoin's dead. I don't think it's dying. I think it's the winner. But I just think the bad actors and the greed are going to make us suffer for a little while. What do you think about that?
So first of all, Bitcoin is not crashing, as you hear in the media. The only thing that's crashing is the fiat Ponzi scheme that we've experienced for the last many decades.
Yes.
So that the issue is the current monetary system in the U.S., but also everywhere in the world, right? All of these government based currencies that central banks can print out at will. That's why, I mean, that's the issue. And, the Bitcoin network, if you look at the fundamentals and some of the metrics, I mean, I've never been more bullish about Bitcoin than I am today, because I look at, I mean, I don't waste time with the short-term price volatility in US dollars. I know that's what people focus on. For me, I really look at, okay, is the network getting stronger? Is Bitcoin adoption on the rise in around the world? You know, is the hash rate going up? Are more people mining Bitcoin? Those are the things you got to look at. And if you look at the like I said, the fundamentals for Bitcoin have never been stronger. You know, going all the way up to 69K and down to 17. I know for a lot of people who got in, like yourself, in 2020 or even after that, to see something go up that quick and then back down. I mean, that's a scary thing. I get that. I got in the space in 2016, so I've had the luxury of, you know, being through a whole. I mean, I say, you know, you don't look at the Bitcoin price for at least 4 years. You know, you got to go with the 4-year cycle with the halvening. And, you know, just, again, experiencing kind of that in 2017, and then, you know, seeing it going from $500 to 20K back down to 3K. I mean, this is like, you know, if you spend a bit of time in Bitcoin, it's par for the course, you know. Unfortunately, you know, for a lot of, again, people who are not used to this, our emotions take over.
Yeah.
Especially, and I mean, you mentioned some bad actors. I mean, you know, one of the issues is that a lot of people, and forget about like retail investors, I'm talking about institutions, right? Everyone was waiting for institutions to come piling in.
Exactly.
We finally got that. And it was great when the price was going up, right? Because institutions were buying in large amounts. However, the other side of that, right, is when you know, people get liquidated, and these big institutions get liquidated because there's too much leverage in the system.
Exactly.
You know, it's like you come crashing down.
But which is anti the spirit. That's my problem. That it's anti the spirit of Bitcoin to be leveraged on Bitcoin, right? We're just turning it back into the Ponzi fiat currency scheme that's been going on. Now these guys got in there and they turned Bitcoin into the same thing. They tainted it. That's how I feel right now.
Well, you know, the thing is, again, we have to remember, like, Bitcoin is still very young, right? I mean, a lot of these like fiat currencies have been around for over 50 years.
Yeah.
You know, Bitcoin is still very young, and the market is constantly evolving. And I think, you know, what happened in the last couple of months, I think that just shows that Bitcoin is a pure market, right? So I forget who said it on Twitter. I think it's a great quote. You know, there will be no bailouts, only liquidations, right? So you don't see governments, you know, or central banks coming in and bailing people out. If you were too leveraged, you paid the price, right? Yeah. And you know, when the price is going up, it's great. But when the price goes down, it's either you put up more collateral or you're going to lose your position.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, you know, like that's part of the learning process for a lot of investors. You know, and that's, I mean, Bitcoin is very much, it's the wild, wild west. You know, no one's going to hold your hand. There's no 1-800 number to call. You can't call your bank and you know, and ask for, you know, for a bailout or a refund. If you are going to start getting leveraged and trading, and again, a lot of these products, you know, that have been built on top of Bitcoin are for people who want to kind of experiment with that, and that's fine. You know, you're free to do that, but you have to understand the risks that you're taking on. And that's why something that we always preach to beginners coming to into the space is take your time to learn, you know, not your keys, not your coins.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a big, that's another big issue, right?
Yes, exactly.
You know, everyone was getting so excited about these DeFi products and, oh, you know, I'm going to lock up my Bitcoin on this site and I'm going to earn 5%. And of course, like, you know, you're not, there's no free lunch. I mean, if someone's giving you 5%, you have to ask yourself
more.
Why. Bitcoin, it was even more than that.
8-10%.
Just purely Bitcoin. I mean, you know, I mean, if the bank's giving you, you know, less than 1%,
exactly,
this platform, you know, is giving you 5%, you need to ask yourself why. Exactly.
Someone told me that. They're like, oh, why don't you, you know, start staking? They can offer you a bunch of percent, whatever the number was. Yeah. And I said, how is that possible? How the heck are they giving me that much percent? I'm like, where are they getting that money from? And I didn't get a clear response. And I said, first of all, that's for me, that's against the spirit of Bitcoin. That's exactly why I'm in Bitcoin is, or however to phrase that. That's why I got in Bitcoin, because I didn't want this sort of leverage thing. I want to hold my Bitcoin, keep it away, and nobody could touch it but me. So even that is sad to see from these exchanges that they're offering this. It's like in my opinion, what I understood is completely against the spirit of Bitcoin.
Well, this is it. I mean, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is it allows you to truly, for the first time in history, it allows you to actually have full control over your money. Mm-hmm. If you control your keys, you control your money. Now, with that, power and responsibility comes a certain amount of learning. Like, you have to understand what you're doing, and again, it doesn't take a genius to figure out how to self-custody their coins, but you need to learn some basic skills. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're not ready for that type of responsibility. And I mean, you have the option of parking your coins on an exchange, but I think now we're seeing people are starting to understand what those risks are.
Yeah, exactly.
And unfortunately, some people had to pay the price, and you're seeing a lot of these platforms are having liquidation problems, and the coins are not there, or they're freezing accounts and people can't get their money. It's a shit show. It really is. But I come back to that quote, there will be no bailouts, only liquidations. And I think once this clears, the dust settles, I think a lot of people will, a lot of investors will have learned some valuable lessons. Mm-hmm. And it also allows the market to kind of, get rid of the weaker hands.
Exactly, yeah.
Hand over the Bitcoin to the stronger hands.
The people in the space, for the last 2 years, or since I got in it, we're touting Bitcoin, greatest money, strongest money, DCA into Bitcoin. But I love Robert Breedlove and Leah Halpern and a few other guys in the space. Preston Pish also I find very strong.
Yeah.
But they were more or less saying to DCA. But if someone DCA'd over the last 2 years, you got wrecked. It's serious stuff. I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
If my wallet at some point was perhaps showing 6 figures and that amount gets halved or more, it's whoa, man, that was a year of food for us. So I didn't really appreciate that. It was strongest money, and you're following the NASDAQ. Yeah. And then, anyways, at the point when that's why I was shook too, because I was on Twitter too, and people started coming out kicking. As Bitcoin was dropping, they had their go. The anti-Bitcoin. The trolls came out strong. So it was getting to be a mental battle. And I remember that one night, I don't know when it was, maybe 3 weeks ago, when it was I don't know, overnight it was 20. I was just watching my phone and it went from 22 to 17K. And I was what the heck is going on? And then I was oh man, maybe those guys calling 9K Bitcoin were right. What's going on? This bubble. So it was scary. So my point in all this was the guys preaching the DCA for the last 2 years. Well, look, Robert Breedlove, man, you maybe gave some wrong advice. Should we not have known that there was this type of bubble aspect to it? I just found that a little reckless as advice.
The thing is that you can't, an asset can't go up that much without the volatility, right? There has to be volatility along the way.
Exactly.
So again, I mean, people who are coming from traditional finance, and they get excited when an investment gives you a 10% return. Then they see this thing go 3x 4x and then down 80%. I mean, well, what is this? I mean, this is insane volatility.
Exactly.
But again, I mean, you got to zoom out. You got to have a long-term perspective here, and that's why I say don't look at the price every 4 years, right? Even if you come in, even if you came in the last 6 months, right? If you wait at least 4 years and zoom out, I mean, I'm pretty confident you'll be happy. But the other thing too is find me a better performing asset in the last 10 years. Right?
Yeah, if you look at it like that, I know it makes sense. It makes sense.
But here's the other thing. I mean, we're living in insane times right now. This is so. I mean, forget about Bitcoin. Obviously, I mean, we're talking about the price of Bitcoin, but let's look at how everything else is doing. Like, what's going on in the global economy? I mean, we've got record high inflation across the board. You've got central banks increasing interest rates. You've got the 10-year Treasury bond, which was always was supposed to be the safe haven. It's like if shit hits the fan, just buy bonds and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
The 10-year Treasury bond has had its worst annual performance since 1788. 1788. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so I mean, we have some a major we're experiencing a major deflationary shock right now in all assets.
Yeah.
And I even, I was telling people months ago, I said, guys, like, look, we've had easy money for the last 10 years. We've had low interest rates. These were the perfect conditions to get leverage, to take risks. And now basically we're, the tide has turned. We've got a major shock to the system. Easy money is no longer there.
Yeah.
And I think central banks have no choice but to continue increasing interest rates, because at some point, right, I mean, things are really going to break down. And when that happens, they need room to come back down. So if interest rates are at 1%, and shit hits the fan, they have no room.
Yeah.
We're going to be negative yield territory. So you got to increase rates. So when, the next, collapse happens, you have room to pivot and to bring rates back down. But you know what? I mean, all roads lead to Bitcoin. And I know, like, right now it's maybe hard to see that because of all the, madness going on.
Yeah.
But you've got, like, there's basically nowhere to hide right now. There is no safe asset. Like, when the US dollar is a wrecking ball, which is what's happening right now, because there's shortage in US dollars because there's so much US debt in the world. So when everyone needs US dollars, that affects every other asset, and everything has to get repriced, right? And that's kind of what we're experiencing right now. And I think, look, some experts will say, well, this is the bottom. I think we've got lower to go. I think the market's going to go lower. I think bonds are going to go lower. I think real estate is, we haven't even seen a real correction in real estate yet.
Right.
Bitcoin, I look at what is the cost to mine one Bitcoin, right? It's around 17,000 right now. So I think that's a good bottom. Could it go under 17,000 in the current, conditions that we have right now? Sure. I think it's possible, but
yeah,
I think that's, if it goes under 17,000, load the truck.
But do you fear? I fear that the big money and the institutions and the billionaires and even BlackRock, they own 7% of MicroStrategy. So I almost have a fear that the big money's in it and controlling it just like a stock. Do you feel that it could be tainted in that sense? That the big money caught on and they're like, boom, we bought 30% of the Bitcoin market.
That's kind of what I was saying before, right? Like, everyone was waiting for the day that the institutions came into the space, and they finally arrived. And that's, I think, why you're seeing sort of this huge, because it wasn't, the current, the last bull market, the last bull run, I don't think had anything to do with retail investors, right? So in 2017, it was all about retail. All these retail, it was your grandmother was buying crypto, your neighbor was buying, everyone you knew was buying crypto. I think this bull run, it was more about the corporations and the micro strategies and the institutions and the hedge funds coming to the space and taking really big positions.
Okay.
But again, the flip side of that is because, when the price goes down and people are too leveraged.
But let's say those guys, I'm not saying in the leverage part, but let's say the control part. If like big money got in,
right,
and now they have an ability to control it as much as they do the Nasdaq or any other stock, is that a possibility? Is that a fear? That's what I'm telling myself now. I'm like, damn, they got in and they're not going to let us have our cake. They're going to destroy our story and our narrative, and they're going to
I think at some point, yeah, I mean, it's just like, I mean, the market's got to evolve as more and more institutions come in, and forget about institutions. I mean, I think you're going to start seeing nations buying Bitcoin, right? Like what happens when central banks decide, hey, there's no point in buying gold. Let's buy Bitcoin. I mean, this is classic game theory, right? Like if you notice, there was a couple of months ago, El Salvador hosted a Bitcoin conference for other central banks. Basically, there were people from all over the world, from different central banks that got together and were learning about Bitcoin. And if you look at the countries that were represented at that conference, a lot of those countries were in Latin America, Africa, Europe, Middle East. So this is classic game theory, right? It's like at some point, nations are not going to want to hold on to US dollars, not going to want on to gold. They're going to want Bitcoin, and the market will just continue to evolve at that point. And as more and more players enter the space, it'll be harder and harder, right, for one big whale to control the price.
What do you think? So now it's probably been like 13 months since El Salvador bought, something along those lines.
And they're still buying.
But we haven't heard another nation state jump in yet. What do you make of that timeline? Is that okay? Is that still short? Or would we? I guess we would have expected someone else to jump on by now.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, in North America, we focus a lot on the price, the US dollar price of Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin is still, we're in 2022. It's still viewed as a speculative asset here. Mm-hmm. The reality, though, is if you go to some other countries where, we're complaining about inflation here at, 9%, 20%, whatever your number is. The reality is you've got countries where inflation is at 100%, 200%, right? And that in those places, they need some type of money to, they need sound money. Like it's not about, an investment. They need they need to get off a boat that's basically sinking. So Bitcoin is the lifeboat. It's the rescue. It's their way to opt out of the, crashing monetary system. So, I talk to, for example, we have a group in Nigeria that we speak to, and
really,
and they're telling me like Bitcoin is on the rise. I mean, the adoption rate is through the roof there. I mean, people...
and tell me there, what did the government? I thought I remember the government saying something about Bitcoin. Did they not accept it? I always hear Nigeria and Bitcoin, but what's the story there? The individuals are buying it, not the government.
Yeah, I mean, individuals are like Bitcoin is people want Bitcoin. Okay. So, I mean, you're also seeing a rise in stable coins, right? I mean, that's kind of the other alternative is you get like US dollars on a blockchain.
Okay.
But the reality is, if you get, if you go outside the US and Canada and even Europe, if you look at countries in Brazil, for example, right? Like, you're seeing some major players in Brazil adopting Bitcoin and even offering their users, the option to purchase Bitcoin. Yeah. Argentina, different countries in Africa, Asia. I mean, there's so many countries right now that need Bitcoin as a way to opt out of the fiat, system that is collapsing. So, I mean, I think the US dollar will be the last fiat currency to collapse. And that's why we're kind of like, we've been very, and even in Canada, we've had the luxury of having a somewhat, stable banking system. I mean, banks, I mean, they, the interest rates that they offer you to park your money is ridiculous. But, you're pretty much certain that if you go to the bank tomorrow, and you want to take, like, let's say you have $5,000 in your account, the money will be there, right? Whereas you see countries like Lebanon, I mean, people go to the bank and the bank's like, sorry, we don't have your money.
100%. Listen, I buy that 100%. That's why I fell in love with Bitcoin. I was on the streets preaching Bitcoin. But now, with this, took a step back and I was like, man, who was I preaching to at like 60K and might have bought some? And it's like,
no, I mean, listen, you're not alone, and that's why, you know, I always say, like, you know, I have friends and family who ask me about Bitcoin all the time, and I say, look, take the time to understand that, like, why the world needs Bitcoin right now.
Exactly.
What is the value proposition of Bitcoin? Forget about an investment going up, and, you know, forget about that.
But John, let me interrupt. This is what I worried about, because I believe everything you're saying. I believe it. I believed it, and I still believe it. But I fear that I fell in love with the story, because I still love the story. Yeah. But I fear that I was like, oh, did I just fall in love with the story? Did these Bitcoiners on Twitter and YouTube create this libertarian freedom narrative that I bought into that maybe is not even the truth of Bitcoin, because it might now be controlled and manipulated? That's really a fear. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just being open with you. This is what I feel. And I still, to this day, love the story of Bitcoin. I love the Bitcoiners, but it's just like, at this point, it's like, you know, strongest money, all the story that I bought into and I was preaching. I was like, man, maybe I just bought into like a narrative, like a libertarian narrative.
No, listen, I mean, these are great questions that you're asking. You know, again, I mean, you gotta, you know, zoom out, understand the history of money, understand, you know, where we're at in history. I mean, you've got, you know, we're at a major inflection point right now. Like, you've got, I don't know if you read if you heard the book, The Fourth Turning.
No.
So that's a great read, book I recommend to your listeners as well. You know, we're every 40 to 60 years, you see this major, you know, shift in the world, and not just, you know, financially, but politically, philosophically. I mean, we're right there right now. Like, we're at a major turning point. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, this is not like, you know, one problem in one part of the world. It's happening globally on a global scale, and it's happening fast. And, you know, the reality is that the Bitcoin, it's the first time that we really, I mean, when we say, you know, the strongest money, soundest money, it's the first time that humans can actually have full control over their money and be sovereign, you know, with their money. So, you know, coming back to the, you know, fix the money, fix the world. It really is that, you know, if you get to the root of the problem, which is the money, I think the world will flourish. But, you know, the true value proposition of Bitcoin is that you're basically separating state from money, right?
Exactly.
And this takes time. This is not going to happen overnight. And there's going to be a lot of, you know, misunderstandings and FUD along the way.
Yeah.
But I mean, my opinion in all of this really is there is no alternative. I mean, I can't imagine a world without Bitcoin. You know, if we were living in a world right now without Bitcoin, for me, that would be a very dark place. Wow. Bitcoin gives us hope. We're at a point now where there is no alternative. You know, we're on this boat and it's sinking, and you know, we need to get off the boat at some point. And Bitcoin, you know, for me is that is the lifeboat. But it's also this parallel financial system that's being built, right?
Yes.
So I mean,
let me reference one of the articles then that I saw on CoinBeast.
Yeah.
It was about the strength of the network.
Yes.
Correct? That's one of the newest ones. And that's some things I hear being preached. And I'd love to believe it. Maybe you want to just touch on that. And I guess it ties into Bitcoin not being denominated necessarily, or we shouldn't really think of it denominated in US dollars, but it's really its own separate thing built on its own security system.
Yeah, so if you look at, I mean, just technology in general, like, and kind of like the laws around that, right? I mean, it's all about the network effect. I mean, that's why you've seen companies like Facebook and Google, you know, become so successful. It's largely because of the network effect, and that's why it's very difficult once you get a Facebook, Amazon, or Google. It's very difficult to compete with those companies because of their network effect. Like, it's very difficult to replicate that, and once you replicate their network effect, like their network will be even 10 times larger than yours. So it's almost like you're always playing catch up. So that's kind of the story about Bitcoin, and that's why when people say, oh well, there's this other cryptocurrency that is faster, better, stronger. They don't understand that it's almost impossible for another cryptocurrency to ever catch up to Bitcoin's network effect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bitcoin is the only true decentralized global cryptocurrency. Find me another cryptocurrency that is decentralized. That people are mining all over the world. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find any. So that's what Bitcoin represents. And the network effect has never been stronger, and it gets stronger every day. And then, I hear stories of people in Nigeria, people in Argentina, people in Brazil. I mean, Bitcoin is everywhere, and when I got into the space in 2016, I mean, it was, you had Bitcoin, you had Ethereum was just starting, and you had a bunch of these other, shit coins that, I mean, no one even talks about today, but it was really like this thing that was going up and down, and it was like this internet money, and it just being in this space for a couple of years and seeing the amount of like just seeing how it all evolved, and all the products and companies that are being built on top of Bitcoin right now. It is like you've never seen anything like this in your life. I mean, talk about Miami. I was in Miami this year, seeing the amount of people and companies and just different walks of life, and it's just there's so many resources that are piling into this space. So many smart people. Like I said, I mean, I have never been more excited about Bitcoin than I am today, and I get the volatility is a scary thing. And that's why most investors, are unable to time the market, right? Yeah. It is very difficult. I mean, if you look at just the psychology of humans, right? We buy when things go up.
Yeah.
We sell when things go down, and it makes.
That's me.
Well, it's not just you. I mean, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you then. Tell me how you first stomached that 2017 crash. I mean, you were relatively new in the space, right? Under 2 years. How the heck did you mentally and stomachically digest that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I saw it go from 500 all the way up to 20K, back down to 3,000. And I had people very close to me say, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Why the hell would you not have sold it when it was at 20K?
Yeah, exactly.
And I said, well, I lost all my keys in a boating accident, unfortunately. Didn't have a chance to sell my Bitcoin. But I mean, that definitely prepared me for this. And that's why, that the longer you're in this space, you learn and you understand the volatility, and you also start to understand, you're able to separate noise from signal, right?
Yeah.
Like that's very important. Okay, this is noise. I'm not going to pay attention to this. And these are signals. These are things I need to pay attention to. So, look, it was tough, but because, and again, when I got into Bitcoin in 2016, it was just the whole, like, I don't know if you remember you said you got into in 2020. So I don't know if you remember the whole block size, war.
Well, I wanted to touch on, we'll touch on that. I have a lot to say on that. Go ahead.
So that was kind of happening when I got into this space, and I didn't quite understand all of the details. So, I started to panic, and I'm like, wait a second, is this time to get out? Like, what's happening here? There's this civil war going on between the developers and like, what is this? And so, but again, if you do your homework and you take the time to learn about Bitcoin, and let me look, I'll tell you right now, I mean, I never stop learning. I mean, you can be in this, you could be in the space. You could have been in Bitcoin since 2009, and you're still learning, because there's just things move so fast in Bitcoin, and it's just the space is constantly evolving. So you never stop learning, and as long as you're willing to put in the time, that will then prepare you for these bear markets. And that's why I say when you take the time to learn and you invest in your education, that will prepare you for the bear markets. If you are not prepared, I'm a big John Wooden fan. If you know, John Wooden was a famous basketball coach. He always used to tell his players, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So there you go.
I met Pierre Poliev. He came to Montreal, Laval, actually.
Okay.
A few months ago, and I got to ask him about Bitcoin. We weren't allowed to ask questions; it was just a picture. But I asked him about Bitcoin, and I said, "Would you consider putting it on Canada's balance sheet?" But I messed up. I should have said, "Would you consider making it legal tender?" Because it's a big difference. Because his answer to me was like, "Well, I can't control what the central banks do." So technically, I should have told him, "Would you make it legal tender?" Because this legal tender thing, you know how huge it is. I didn't realize, but every time you transact, anytime you move it, technically you're supposed to be paying taxes on it. Like I sent my sister her wedding gift in Bitcoin, so technically that's like a taxable event, and that's so silly. So I think legal tender should be.
Well, there are a lot of things we need to fix in this country. I mean, that's a lot of conversation.
yeah, exactly. And you know what? It's so funny because when I sent my sister her wedding gift, Bitcoin was at 39K. And I tweeted, I'm like, I just sent my sister her wedding gift in Bitcoin, and I said it's probably all downhill from here, and it was like straight downhill. Like we did 39 to 18K in like a month's time, whatever.
She probably thinks you're a cheap bastard now. No, but honestly, I think that's beautiful. When I hear stories like that, I mean, I think like giving the gift of Bitcoin. I mean, can you give a better gift? I mean, no, you just got to tell her, don't look at the price. Just put it in a safe place, and you'll thank me. You'll thank me later on.
It was tough to digest because the stock market was going down one stock at a time.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide right now, right? There is no safe asset right now.
But I would push back and I would say cash, because you know what? I have to feed my kids freak right now. The cash in the account that I'm actually allowed to go to Costco with is freaking the strongest, and I hate to admit that. I hate to say it.
Oh no, but that's good what you're doing. Like so, what I say is, your Canadian dollars, like that's your spending money, right? That's your checkings account. Like you need cash, like you said, to spend. You need to buy groceries.
Yeah.
Bitcoin for me is a savings account. That's money that you don't need tomorrow. You don't need to spend it right away. You're putting it away. And maybe you need to spend it in 5 years. Maybe you decide in 10 years, hey, I'm going to liquidate some of it to put down on a house or something, whatever your needs are. But for me, Bitcoin is your savings account. So yeah, cash. And look, I mean, cash is good, in a bear market. I mean, when, everything gets, when everything goes on sale, I mean, you need some cash to buy things with. So,
live. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, you know what? Let's go back to the blockchain wars. The block size wars for a second, because I have this friend. He's in England and he has a good YouTube channel, Christian Darnton, and I was working with him a bit. We were making some videos and things were going well. He does really good work, but he owned the BTC, he said, and then he started really, I guess, meeting some people, or now he's more of a BSV fan, but he still doesn't own any.
Oh man, we gotta get him on here.
He doesn't know, but you have to see some of his videos. Like he's going strong anti-BTC. He's like, BTC is a scam. Pomp lied to you. Peter McCormick lied to you. It's silliness. Oh, okay, so amazing that I showed you this white paper, because that too is obviously one of the criticisms that I'm sure that you heard. They're like, hey, you guys, you're talking, or even Christian says, he's like, you're talking about hodling. You invented this word. You invented this theory. Bitcoin was created as a peer-to-peer transaction system.
Right.
And his main problem, and then the BSV people's problem, is that it's like Bitcoin can't do transactions. It can't do enough transactions for what it was meant to do. So he's saying it's a failure because it can't do the transaction that it was designed to do. I pushed back a lot of times, and I still do push back, because what I say I liked Bitcoin for was the seizure-resistant asset property that it has. So for me, still to this day, I say, listen, seizure-resistant asset, Bitcoin fills the hole right now. I said payments, we don't really need to fill that hole right now. So I don't see it as a big deal that it was designed for payments and it's not really filling that gap yet. But he would strongly disagree, and the BSV people as well. So I don't know what you know about that or what you think about that.
Well, I'd love to talk to him.
That would be cool.
I'll tell you right off the bat, like, in 2016, that wasn't the priority. So the big misconception that a lot of these, shitcoiners make is that they want everything now. They want, like, they think, that, like, Bitcoin has to be this perfect car. So they want it to be a sports car, and they also want it to be safe. Okay. So the reality is that you can have security and speed at the same time, right? So Bitcoiners understood this, right? And they said, wait a second, and that's kind of what the whole block size debate was about, right? Some players in the space, or some people in Bitcoin, they wanted bigger block sizes so they could process quicker transactions. But the problem with that is that Bitcoin, the network, wasn't secure enough, right? And a lot of Bitcoiners understood, no, first we need to make sure the network is secure, right? No one's going to park their money on this network if it's not secure, right? If it's going to break. I mean, how many times have we seen Ethereum break or other shitcoins break, right? Yeah. And that's because the network is not secure, right? So Bitcoiners understood that this was the priority at the beginning. They had to make sure that, the network was, basically all the pieces were in place so that the network was stable and people could have confidence, putting their money in this thing. Now, the payment thing, right? And again, if you look at the history of money, I mean, money first has to be there has to be a store of value first. Then you develop the payment part later. And that's what Lightning was for, right? So people who are into BSV and all the other shitcoins, I mean, they haven't done their homework, because there is a payment solution that's been built on top of Bitcoin. It didn't happen in 2016. It took time to build, right? Yeah. But now we have something called the Lightning Network, which allows for very quick and cheap transactions on top of Bitcoin.
But they'll push back, or he's pushed back, and he said the problem with the Lightning Network and why it's a joke is because you're off-chain. So he said all this was created because you were supposed to be on-chain. He goes, now you're off-chain, so I'm assuming that he's comparing it to something just as good as PayPal. That's their pushback, that it's off-chain.
So it's not. I don't like how he's phrasing it, because it's like a second level, right? That's been built. So if you're building a house, right, obviously your foundation needs to be solid. That's kind of the beginning of Bitcoin. And now you've built the second level and even third level, so you can do other things on top of your house. Now, the thing is that all transactions have to get settled back onto that base layer, right? So it's like you and I, right? We can open up a channel and we can send money back and forth a million times, and we don't have to pay all these fees, right? But then at some point, we have to settle on the base layer. It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant or a bar and you have a tab, you open up a tab and you're like, okay, I'm going to buy drinks. But then at some point before you leave the bar, you have to settle with the waitress and you have to pay for those drinks. Yeah. So that's kind of how Lightning works. And it is very much built on top of Bitcoin. And to say that that's off-chain thing. I mean, again, you can't have a secure network and fast transactions, right? So if you want all of that to happen on the base layer, something's got to give, right? Yeah. There are trade-offs. Oh, okay. Yeah. Which a lot of these shitcoiners, they either understand or they pretend not to understand, right? Because they want to promote they want to show their coin, and they want people to buy, their coin that is, pretty much worth nothing, but they can pump it up, get it up to a certain price, and they sell.
Well, like I said, I was always responding to him. I said, we have less of a need right now for the payment system, the transaction system. It's not like, so should we really be focusing or worried about that when that need is less? I need more of a seizure resistant asset. So if Bitcoin's going to fill those shoes, well, then right now I'm happy. Exactly. And if that's strong enough for now, I mean, okay, then the stuff will get added on it. And I even wrote an article, and I was saying, did Satoshi know this? Like, maybe he knew this. Maybe he knew we needed more of a store of value, and it had to fill the shoes of a store of value first before it could come. Anyway, I was just speculating. Yeah. I was storytelling, but
That's a great point. The base layer has to be secure, and then you build your second and third layers on top of that. And that's what we're seeing right now, right? I mean, if you spend a little bit of time in Bitcoin, you're going to see all these cool products, in addition to Lightning and all these other side chains that are being built on top of Bitcoin. It's an amazing thing. But again, these things take time. And it also depends, what your needs are. I mean, if you're just looking to, you want to protect your wealth, or like you said, use it as a store of value, you can. If you want to transact with it and buy a cup of coffee, you can do that too. But obviously, like, the priority, in 2016 wasn't for Bitcoin to be a payment network. But that's all coming.
I have another friend, actually, who's a big Hex fan. Do you know anything about Hex by any chance?
Oh, is that the Richard
Heart? Yeah, Richard. But Richard Heart, he first of all, he's a good debater. Second of all, he called.
He's a great marketer.
He said there's videos of him, and he keeps. Some people make highlight reels, and he's like, "I called the Bitcoin top on the day." And he says it over and over because I think it's true. Apparently, it's true. Maybe I should double check that. But I called the Bitcoin top on the day. And anyways, do you know anything about him? Have you looked into him? He's an interesting character.
He's a very interesting character. He's been in the space for a long time. I mean, he's a great marketing guy, which is why he eventually just created his own cryptocurrency and tried to shill it and pump the price. And I'm sure he made money with it. But what's funny? What's funny is a lot of these promoters of other cryptocurrencies, they always end up selling their coin for Bitcoin. They get it to a certain price, and then they want to go back into Bitcoin. So, but there are a lot of interesting people in the space. I mean, and you know what? Look, it's you are free to to create your own cryptocurrency. You are free to fork off of Bitcoin and create your own version of Bitcoin. But does that mean you're going to create a better version of Bitcoin? Does that mean that your coin is better?
Well,
no.
What happens if we create a coin and we limit the cap to 20 million? How about that? Is that better than Bitcoin?
Well, but you won't have the network.
Exactly. And you know what? It's almost been an hour. I appreciate your time so much, but let's end it on this, because Michael Saylor, I love him. And I was saying, like, this guy is like my hero. I said, if I ever get to interview him, I'm not doing any more interviews because it would be like the greatest interview of all time. But now in hindsight, and you gotta love his grit, his determination, the way he speaks. But looking back, obviously, if we could just criticize him a bit, it's like, okay, like Michael, like, you're buying at the top constantly, and you're leveraging constantly. Like, you're leveraging at super high prices. Like, you don't have any insight at all, like being a CEO, being a billionaire. BlackRock owns 7% of your company. Like, you have no technical analysis to know that it was a little silly to leverage yourself to be buying at the 45K mark. Well, anyway, just your thoughts on Michael Saylor.
Well, I mean, the thing is again, his whole position with Bitcoin, I think, is very long term. Like, he's I mean, he understands where we're going. Not like where we are right now. I mean, I'm sure he understood there was going to be some risk there. There was a chance of the price going down at any time just because of the financial conditions in the world right now. To say I knew exactly when the price was going to go down. I don't think anybody knew. These things happen, and usually they happen when no one's expecting it. But I think Michael Saylor understands that we have a serious problem, with the whole, fiat currencies. And, if you're running a public company and you got all this cash sitting on your balance sheet, what do you do with the cash, right?
Exactly. Well, but the only criticism I would give him, it's more than cash, that he went to go borrow cash.
Right.
And raise cash.
And I think he saw opportunity. I mean, interest rates were super low. I think he even said it publicly, right? Like, unless Bitcoin goes, I think, under 3,000 around that price. Exactly. He's fine. Like, they don't have to liquidate any of their Bitcoin. So I don't think he's panicking. I think, again, he's looking at this from a very long-term perspective. Yeah. Exactly. And I think his whole thing is like, I don't want to be sitting on all this cash. So, hey, here's a great opportunity. interest rates are low. Even if the price goes down, we're going to hold, and eventually it'll go back up again.
Yeah, like I find them super charismatic, and sometimes I would listen to him talk, and I would have to stop listening to him because I would buy Bitcoin when I listen to him talk. So it's like I have to close his interviews. I can't take it anymore. Like I'm always buy Bitcoin every time I listen to him.
Oh yeah, well, you don't get more bullish than that.
Then but then okay, on that, then let's just transition to let's say Max Keiser for a second. With his last January, he was predicting 220K Bitcoin for the year 2021. Like that's maybe a little silly on his part. I love his Bitcoin maximalism stance, but maybe that stuff, these predictions are a little toxic for the scene. Do you have any, do you notice anything, do you ever see something and you're like, because I'll go back to Michael Saylor for a second. I saw at the conference, he's like, don't buy gold, don't sell your Bitcoin. And that stuff seemed, as though I love it, it just comes off, even to a Bitcoin skeptic, anyone else seeing it, they're going to be like, a little shady. Anything, maybe you give me a critique on the space?
Look, I mean, like I said, you got to do your own homework. You can't just listen to one person and make up your mind. I think it's really important to bring in a lot of different perspectives and even listen to the people who don't believe in Bitcoin. Who think Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme or a bubble or is going to zero. Listen to their arguments, and then listen to the Michael Saylors, the Max Keisers.
Yeah.
And the Dylan Leclercs and the Saifedeans, and then decide for yourself which argument makes the most sense. And I think if you do that, you'll have a really clear head on what's going on, and why a lot of the Bitcoin skeptics don't they don't understand Bitcoin, or they didn't do their homework on Bitcoin, right? A lot of Bitcoin skeptics, you hear their arguments, and then once you start digging, it's like, wait a second, they're looking at Bitcoin from a very superficial level.
Yeah.
But again, you got to make up your own mind, and you got to do your homework. That's number one. But at the same time, I mean, I think, people like Max Keiser and, when they make these really bullish, Bitcoin's, going $1 million, $3 million. I mean, again, what's your time frame? Is it next year? Is it in 10 years?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody knows. Nobody knows. But you look at, I mean, I'm not like a mathematician by any means, but if you look at the amount of money right now that's sitting in bonds, right? And you look at Europe right now that have, people are buying negative yielding bonds.
Wow.
I mean, let that sit, for a little bit. That's what? I'm guaranteed to lose money. That doesn't make any sense, but people are buying these things. And there's trillions of dollars sitting in these bonds. Yeah. You've got real estate, gold. I mean, at some point, where is all this money going to go? Right. I
had a friend that he wrote Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, or BTC's a Ponzi scheme. I said maybe, but I said it's less of a Ponzi scheme than fiat currency.
Oh my goodness. No. And this is the frustrating part, right? People they don't even understand the fiat Ponzi scheme that they're a part of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we gotta take a step back. Understand money, understand the system you are currently participating in, and then it'll be a lot easier for you to understand Bitcoin, because then you'll be like, oh, wait a second, Bitcoin is a solution. I get it. Mm-hmm. But you have to understand what the problem is first. And a lot of people don't understand the problem, right? I mean, now they're starting to say, oh, wait a second, gas prices are going up, my grocery bill is going up, what's going on?
Yeah.
So they're starting to wake up a bit, but I still think, I mean, it's so early. And this is why I keep reminding people, we're in the third inning. This is still so early in this space. So yeah, it's, but what a time to be alive.
Yeah, I love the space. Listen, I love the space. I love the story. When I continue seeing how it evolves, it's super interesting. The people are super interesting. So, sometimes I listen to it, I go, look, I'm not that crazy. A lot of it makes a lot of sense, So it's really a beautiful thing. And I thank you for your time and letting me air out my concerns. You're a good sport. You answered well, and in no way that I mean to try and attack or go against Bitcoin. I'm like a Bitcoiner at heart for sure.
No, but these are the conversations that need to be had, right? Like,
yeah.
People. All the questions you asked, I think, are valid. And again, I know a lot of people entered the space, in the last year or two, and for sure, it's a scary thing to see something go up that fast and then right back down.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I always say, like, bear markets it's a great time to learn and build and just understand like what your options are and what you're getting yourself into. So I think it's a great time to get back in, but also just take the time to learn and really understand the value proposition of Bitcoin.
Exactly. Wonderful. Would you be interested if I could want to set up that debate with maybe an anti-BTC or maybe an ASV?
Anytime. For sure.
I'll send you some of his stuff. He's a nice guy. He's entertaining as well. So we'll discuss off air. But again, John, I thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers.
Ciao.